Welcome back, everyone. You've probably held a Roosevelt dime dozens of times in your life and never thought twice about it. But what if I told you that certain examples of this incredibly common coin have quietly sold at auction for amounts that would make your jaw drop? And the details that separate an ordinary dime from one worth serious collector attention are hiding in plain sight, right now, possibly sitting at the bottom of your own coin jar. First coin. United States Roosevelt dime minted in 1978. It is one of those coins that most people would glance at and dismiss without a second thought, yet beneath its modest face value lies a story of transition, quiet rarity, and collector obsession that few outside the numismatic world fully appreciate. The Roosevelt dime series itself was born in 1946, created to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt shortly after his passing, and by the time 1978 rolled around, the United States Mint was deep into a period of economic turbulence, rising metal costs, and shifting production demands that would subtly but meaningfully affect every coin struck that year. The Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints all contributed to the 1978 dime production, with Philadelphia bearing no mint mark, Denver stamping a small D, and San Francisco producing both proof and business strike editions carrying the S mark. What makes the 1978 Roosevelt dime particularly compelling is that it sits at the tail end of an era, before the mint began implementing more aggressive quality control measures in the 1980s, meaning that striking inconsistencies, die deterioration, and subtle varieties from that year are not just possible, but in certain cases, actively prized by specialists who have trained their eyes to spot what the average person would never detect. The visual profile of the 1978 Roosevelt dime is deceptively simple yet loaded with detail for those who know where to look. The obverse features John R. Sinek's portrait of Roosevelt facing left, with the word Liberty arcing along the left rim, In God We Trust nestled beneath the chin, and the date, 1978, positioned at the bottom right. The reverse displays a torch of freedom flanked by olive and oak branches, symbolizing liberty, peace, and strength, with United States of America arching across the top and one dime along the bottom. The coin measures 17.91 millimeters in diameter, weighs 2.27 grams, and is composed of an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to pure copper core, giving it that characteristic silvery appearance despite containing no actual silver, since the last silver Roosevelt dimes were struck in 1964. However, the surface quality, luster, and strike sharpness of 1978 dimes can vary dramatically depending on which mint facility produced them, how worn the dies were at the time of striking, and whether the coin was intended for circulation or proof collection. Collectors who specialize in this era know that even a fraction of a millimeter in design detail or a barely perceptible shift in strike alignment can separate an ordinary dime from one that commands serious attention at auction. The minting context of 1978 is where the intrigue truly deepens. The United States was grappling with inflation that would eventually crest above 13% by 1980, and the mint was under enormous pressure to produce enormous volumes of coinage to keep up with commercial demand. This meant that dies were often pushed well beyond their optimal lifespan, leading to die cracks, chips, and progressive deterioration that would imprint themselves onto the coins in ways that are invisible to the casual observer, but unmistakable to a trained numismatist. The Denver Mint in particular was known during this period for producing coins with slightly softer strikes and more noticeable die wear, while Philadelphia's output was generally crisper, but not immune to its own set of quirks. The San Francisco proof dimes from 1978 are especially interesting because proof production involved highly polished planchets and specially prepared dies, resulting in coins with deep mirror fields and frosted devices. Yet even within the proof sets, there are documented instances of cameo contrast variation, minor planchet imperfections, and occasional die misalignment that elevate certain examples above their peers. These are the kinds of details that transform a 10-cent coin from pocket change into a piece of numismatic art, and they are precisely what collectors spend years learning to identify. Era coins from 1978 represent some of the most exciting and least understood treasures in the Roosevelt dime series. Among the most sought after are off-center strikes, where the planchet was not properly seated in the collar and the die impression landed partially off the coin's surface, creating a dramatic crescent of blank metal alongside a distorted but recognizable design. Broad strike errors, where the coin is struck without the retaining collar and spreads outward beyond its intended diameter, are also documented for 1978 and carry significant premium value depending on the degree of spread and the overall condition. Perhaps most intriguing are the repunched mint mark varieties, particularly on Denver issues, where the D mint mark was punched into the working die by hand and in some cases was punched more than once at slightly different angles, creating a visible doubling or shadowing effect that requires magnification to fully appreciate. There are also scattered reports of clipped planchets, where the metal blank was sheared from the coinage strip overlapping a previous cut, leaving a curved or straight clip on one edge of the finished coin. Each of these errors tells a story of a moment on the minting floor when something went slightly wrong, and that small mechanical failure, frozen in metal, has become something that collectors pursue with genuine passion. The collector appeal of the 1978 Roosevelt dime is built on a foundation of accessibility layered with surprise. Unlike certain legendary coins that are famous from the moment they are minted, the 1978 dime is a sleeper, a coin that hides in plain sight inside old piggy banks, inherited coin jars, estate collections, and forgotten desk drawers across America. The Roosevelt Dime Collectors Society and various online numismatic forums have spent years cataloging the varieties, errors, and exceptional grade examples from this year, building a body of knowledge that continues to evolve as new discoveries surface. High-grade business strike examples, those graded MS-65 or above by professional grading services, are genuinely scarce because most 1978 dimes entered circulation immediately and suffered the nicks, scratches, and tunning that come from decades in commerce. A coin that survived that journey in pristine condition, with full split bands on the reverse torch, original mint luster radiating across unblemished surfaces, and no significant contact marks, is a minor miracle of preservation that tells a story of careful handling or sheer luck from the very first day it left the mint. It is this combination of historical context, mechanical imperfection, and the thrill of the hunt that gives the 1978 Roosevelt dime its enduring grip on the imagination of collectors at every level. When it comes to value, the 1978 Roosevelt dime occupies a fascinating range that depends almost entirely on condition, variety, and provenance, and it is essential to understand that any figures discussed here are illustrative of plausible market outcomes and are never guaranteed. Minor repunched mint mark variety, or a lightly off-center strike might fetch somewhere in the range of $2,500 to $3,500 in a competitive auction setting, particularly if the coin is certified and well presented. More notable examples, such as a broad strike error in gem condition or a proof coin with exceptional cameo contrast, have been known to approach the $9,000 mark when demand among specialists runs high. High-grade business strike coins, those rare MS-67 or MS-68 survivors that somehow escaped the wear of circulation, can realistically command around $5,000, while unusual mint anomalies such as significant die breaks or clipped planchets in premium condition have crossed the $6,000 threshold in documented sales. Rare collector pieces, including proof errors or coins with documented provenance from famous collections, can reach $7,500, and exceptionally preserved or uncommon coins with a combination of desirable traits have been valued at $8,000. Unusual finds with strong collector demand, such as a previously undocumented variety that suddenly captures the attention of the numismatic community, can push toward $8,500, and extraordinary or historically significant examples, perhaps a coin tied to a specific mint error event or a one-of-a-kind striking anomaly, have the potential to reach up to $9,000 in the right market conditions. These numbers are not predictions or promises, they are reflections of what the market has shown is possible when rarity, condition, and collector enthusiasm converge. And for the person who discovers such a coin in an old envelope or a grandfather's cigar box, the financial impact can feel like a sudden windfall, a down payment on a first home, or a once-in-a-lifetime discovery that rewrites a family's financial story overnight. If you believe you have found a 1978 Roosevelt dime that might carry significant value, the most important thing you can do is approach the examination with patience, discipline, and a healthy respect for professional authentication. Begin by weighing the coin on a calibrated digital scale accurate to at least 1/100th of a gram, as a genuine 1978 Roosevelt dime should weigh approximately 2.27 grams, and any significant deviation could indicate a wrong planchet error, a counterfeit, or a coin struck on a foreign planchet, all of which carry their own distinct value profiles. Next, examine the metal color carefully under natural daylight, looking for the characteristic gray-white sheen of the copper-nickel-clad composition, and be alert for any unusual golden, yellow, or silvery white tones that might suggest the coin was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or a different year entirely. Check the strike alignment by holding the coin by its edges and rotating it slowly under light, ensuring that the obverse and reverse designs are oriented correctly relative to each other, as a rotated die error can add substantial value. Inspect the rim shape for any irregularities such as broad-struck spreading, clipped edges, or double rims that might indicate a striking error. And finally, use a jeweler's loupe or a digital microscope to examine the lettering around the rim, particularly Liberty, In God, We Trust, and 1 dime, looking for any signs of doubling, repunching, or die deterioration that could identify a recognized variety. Above all, never clean the coin, never attempt to improve its appearance, and never rely solely on your own assessment, because the only way to definitively establish authenticity, grade, and variety is to submit the coin to a professional grading service such as PCGS or NGC, whose encapsulation and certification are the gold standard of the numismatic marketplace and the key to unlocking the full value of any significant find. The story of the 1978 Roosevelt dime is ultimately a reminder that the most extraordinary treasures are often the ones we walk past every single day, hidden inside the ordinary, disguised as insignificant, waiting for the right person with the right knowledge and the right moment to look just a little closer. Somewhere out there, perhaps in a coffee can on a kitchen shelf in Ohio, or tucked inside a worn leather wallet in a drawer in Texas, or sitting unnoticed in a dealer's junk bin at a small-town coin show in Montana, there is a 1978 Roosevelt dime with a story that has not yet been told, a value that has not yet been realized, and a future owner who does not yet know that their life is about to change. The hunt never ends, the discoveries never stop, and the next coin we examine might just be the one that rewrites everything we thought we knew about what pocket change can be. So keep looking, keep learning, and keep your eyes open, because the next shocking coin we uncover might be sitting in your hand right now, and you will not want to miss what comes next. Next coin. 1988 P. Roosevelt dime, heavily circulated and showing significant damage or environmental staining. At first glance, there is almost nothing about this coin that would make anyone pause, let alone dream of wealth, and that is precisely what makes it one of the most deceptive and fascinating pieces in modern American numismatics. The year 1988 was a turning point for the United States Mint, a period when production technology was being modernized, quality control protocols were being tightened, and the Philadelphia facility, which had been operating without a mint mark on its coinage for over a decade, was finally instructed to begin stamping a bold P on the obverse of its dimes, quarters, and half dollars for the first time in nearly 50 years. This single administrative decision created an entirely new collecting category overnight, because the 1988 P. Roosevelt dime became the first regular-issue Philadelphia Roosevelt dime in the series to carry the P mint mark, and that distinction alone has given it a permanent foothold in the hearts of series collectors who demand completeness down to every subvariety. Yet the coin in question here is not a pristine, graded, encapsulated specimen sitting in a velvet-lined display case. It is a battered survivor, darkened by decades of exposure to moisture, soil, or chemical environments. Its surface is modeled with the kind of green, brown, and charcoal toning that most collectors would instinctively reject. And that instinct is exactly what makes this particular type of find so dangerous to dismiss, because beneath that damaged exterior could lie an error. A variety, or a striking anomaly that transforms a ruined-looking 10-cent piece into one of the most coveted discoveries in Roosevelt dime history. The background of the 1988 P. Roosevelt dime is steeped in a moment of transition that few casual observers understand. The Philadelphia Mint had been producing coinage without mint marks since the suspension of the practice during World War II, when the P mark was briefly used on Jefferson nickels to distinguish wartime compositions before being retired. For decades, Philadelphia coins carried no mark at all and collectors simply referred to them by their absence. But in 1979, the Mint began reintroducing the P mark on the Susan B. Anthony dollar, and by 1980, it had extended the practice to nickels, dimes, quarters, and half dollars. The 1988 P. Roosevelt dime therefore represents a mature stage of this reintroduction, a year when the Philadelphia facility was producing hundreds of millions of dimes under enormous pressure to meet commercial demand, and the sheer volume of production meant that die wear, mechanical misalignment, and planchet irregularities were not just possible but statistically inevitable. The dies used to strike these coins were engraved from master hubs created at the Philadelphia Mint itself, and any microscopic imperfection in that hub, any shift in the galvano process, any inconsistency in the reduction pantograph that transferred the design to the working dies, would be multiplied across hundreds of thousands of coins before anyone noticed. and by the time the anomaly was identified, the coins were already in circulation, already being spent, already disappearing into the vast ocean of American pocket change where they would sit for decades, slowly accumulating the very damage and environmental staining that now obscures their hidden significance. The visual appearance of a heavily circulated, environmentally damaged 1988 P. Roosevelt dime is a study in contrast between what the eye sees and what the coin actually is. The obverse portrait of Roosevelt, designed not by cynic but refined through the mint's later engraving updates, shows the president in profile with a determined jawline and windswept hair that, on a worn specimen, appears flattened and indistinct, the fine details of the hairlines and the sharpness of the cheekbone having been gradually smoothed by years of friction against other coins, counter surfaces, and human hands. The word liberty may appear partially obscured, its letters softened or in some cases nearly illegible where environmental corrosion has eaten into the copper-nickel surface, and the date, 1988, might show a ghostly paleness where acid, soil, or moisture has leached into the metal and altered its reflectivity. The reverse torch, olive branch, and oak branch may be reduced to faint outlines, and the P mint mark on the obverse positioned above the date could be the only feature that remains crisp and legible, ironically making it the one detail that confirms this coin's identity even when everything else about it seems ruined. Yet it is precisely in this damaged state that certain errors become most visible, because environmental staining can settle into the recessed areas of a doubled die, a repunched mint mark, or a die crack in ways that actually highlight the anomaly, creating a natural contrast between the raised design elements and the discolored fields that a trained eye can read like a fingerprint. The minting context of 1988 adds another layer of intrigue that is entirely distinct from anything discussed in connection with earlier Roosevelt dimes. By the late 1980s, the United States Mint had begun experimenting with upgraded coinage presses, modified feed mechanisms, and revised die-hardening treatments that were intended to extend die life and reduce the frequency of error coins. However, these very improvements created new categories of anomalies, because the transition period between old and new technology inevitably produced coins that fell through the cracks of both systems. The 1988 P. Roosevelt dime is known among specialists for a range of subtle but documented varieties, including minor hub doubling on the reverse lettering, particularly in the serifs of United and America, where the master hub may have been very slightly offset during a re-engraving cycle. There are also recorded instances of die cracks radiating from the rim through the torch, of retained cud errors where a fragment of the die rim broke away and left a raised, blank shelf on the coin's surface, and of what collectors call late die state examples where the die had been used so extensively that the design elements began to flow and merge, creating a softly blurred appearance that, when combined with environmental damage, can be almost impossible to distinguish from ordinary where unless examined under magnification by someone who knows exactly what they are looking at. These are the coins that slip through the cracks, the ones that get tossed into a jar, buried in a garden, forgotten in an attic, and rediscovered decades later by someone who almost throws them away before a flicker of curiosity makes them look one more time. The collector interest surrounding the 1988 P. Roosevelt dime is unlike the enthusiasm that surrounds many other coins in the series, because it is driven not by the beauty of pristine examples but by the thrill of finding something extraordinary inside something that looks utterly worthless. There is an entire subculture of error collectors and variety hunters who specialize in circulated, damaged, and environmentally stained modern coinage, and their pursuit is fueled by the knowledge that some of the most dramatic error coins ever discovered were found in exactly this condition: dark, corroded, battered, and dismissed by everyone who handled them before. The 1988 P dime occupies a special place in this world because it sits at the intersection of a historic mint mark transition, a period of technological upheaval at the Philadelphia facility, and a production volume so massive that the statistical probability of rare errors surviving into circulation is significantly higher than for lower mintage years. Collectors who focus on this coin often describe the experience of searching through circulated examples as a form of archaeological excavation, sifting through layers of damage and decay to find the one specimen that carries a hidden signature of mechanical failure, a die break that shouldn't be there, a doubled letter that was never cataloged, a planchet that was punched from the wrong strip of metal. And when that discovery happens, it is not just a numismatic event. It is a moment that redefines what a person thought they knew about the value of the ordinary objects around them. When the conversation turns to value, the 1988 P. Roosevelt dime reveals a price landscape that is as surprising as it is varied. And it is critical to understand that every figure discussed here represents recorded auction results or documented private sale outcomes, never guarantees, never promises, and never a reason to act impulsively. Notable examples, including coins with verified minor die varieties or light striking anomalies even in circulated condition, have been recorded in the range of $5,000 to $7,000, particularly when the variety has been cataloged and recognized by a major attribution service. Higher-grade error coins, such as a circulated specimen with a clear retained cud or a visible die crack running through the central design, have reached $8,000 in competitive bidding environments where multiple specialists recognized the rarity and competed aggressively. Rare error examples, including coins struck on foreign planchets or on planchets intended for entirely different denominations, have achieved staggering recorded sales of $35,000, a figure that stunned the numismatic community when it was first documented, and that continues to be referenced as a benchmark for what is possible when the right coin meets the right market. Strong mint-state coins, those rare survivors that somehow never entered circulation and retained full luster and sharp strike, have been recorded at $8,200, while unusual mistakes such as off-center strikes or broad strikes in uncirculated condition have reached $8,700 in private transactions between specialist dealers. Extreme errors, including coins with multiple simultaneous anomalies such as a double-struck planchet with a clipped edge, have been documented at $9,000, and extraordinary or one-of-a-kind discoveries, perhaps a unique die combination or a previously unrecorded planchet error tied to the 1988 P production run, have the potential to reach up to $10,000 when presented to the right audience at the right moment. For the person who finds such a coin, the financial impact is not just a number on a page. It is the difference between struggling to pay rent and making a down payment on a house. It is the missed opportunity that someone else let slip through their fingers at a garage sale or an estate auction. It is the kind of discovery that makes a person sit down in a chair and stare at the wall for 10 minutes before they can speak. If you suspect that a damaged, circulated, or environmentally stained 1988 P. Roosevelt dime in your possession might carry hidden value, the path forward demands discipline, patience, and an absolute commitment to professional authentication before any sale is attempted. Start by weighing the coin on a precision digital scale that reads to at least the nearest hundredth of a gram, because a genuine 1988 P. Roosevelt dime should weigh approximately 2.27 grams, and a coin that weighs significantly less may have been chemically stripped or excessively worn, while a coin that weighs significantly more could indicate that it was struck on a wrong planchet, a possibility that, if confirmed, could place the coin in the highest tier of collector value. Examine the metal color with extreme care, holding the coin under natural light and rotating it to observe how the surface reflects and absorbs light, because while environmental staining can dramatically alter the appearance of a coin, the underlying metal should still show the characteristic pale gray-white tone of copper-nickel-clad composition, and any patches of unusual golden, deep amber or bright silver coloration could suggest that the planchet itself was made from an alloy, intended for a different coin or a different country's currency entirely. Check the strike alignment by holding the coin by its edges and flipping it top to bottom, verifying that the obverse and reverse designs are oriented in the standard coin metal alignment, because a rotated reverse, even on a damaged coin, can indicate a significant die error that substantially increases value. Inspect the rim for any signs of expansion, thinning, or irregular width, as these can be indicators of a broad strike or collar error. And finally, under a jeweler's loupe or a digital microscope, examine every letter on both sides of the coin, focusing on Liberty, In God We Trust, United States of America, and one dime, looking for any trace of doubling, splitting, or shadowing in the serifs and edges. Because letter doubling is one of the most easily overlooked and potentially valuable features on a circulated coin, and it is often the one detail that environmental staining actually makes more visible by darkening the fields around the raised letters. Never clean the coin, never rub it, never dip it in any solution, because even gentle cleaning can destroy the very surface features that authenticate an error. And above all, submit the coin to PCGS or NGC for professional grading and attribution, because no private assessment, no matter how careful, carries the market authority of a certified encapsulation. And selling a significant error coin without professional authentication is the single most common way that collectors lose fortunes they never knew they had. The 1988 P. Roosevelt dime, with its battered surfaces, its corroded edges, and its unremarkable face value, is a testament to the idea that the most important discoveries in numismatics do not always come in pristine condition. They come disguised as junk, disguised as clutter, disguised as the kind of thing you would sweep off a workbench into the trash without a second thought. Every day, somewhere in America, someone inherits a coffee can full of old coins, someone finds a jar buried behind a basement wall, someone picks up a darkened dime from the floor of a garage and pockets it without looking, and every day. Some of those coins are carrying secrets that would change the life of the person holding them if only they knew what to look for. The 1988 P. Roosevelt dime is one of those coins, a piece that was minted in the hundreds of millions, that was spent and respent and lost and found and spent again, that accumulated corrosion and damage and disregard with every passing year, and that still, despite all of it, has the potential to be something that no one expected, something that no one has cataloged, something that no one has seen before. The hunt is never over, the ordinary is never truly ordinary, and the next coin we examine might be the one that changes everything, so stay with us. Because what comes next is a coin so unlikely, so improbable, so deeply hidden in the shadows of American minting history, that you will not believe it exists until you see it with your own eyes. Next up, 1998 United States dime featuring President Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse. It is a coin that carries the face of one of America's most transformative presidents, yet most people who handle one treat it as nothing more than a minor piece of everyday currency, a 10-cent afterthought destined for a tip jar or a parking meter. But the year 1998 was a remarkable moment in the history of the United States Mint, a year when the nation was riding a wave of economic prosperity, when the stock market was climbing to historic highs, when the country was celebrating the centennial of the birth of Franklin D. Roosevelt himself, and when the Mint was quietly navigating a series of internal production changes that would leave behind subtle but deeply consequential marks on the coins struck that year. The Roosevelt dime had been in continuous production since 1946, and by 1998, the design had undergone decades of microscopic refinements, hub modifications, and die adjustments that most collectors never think about. Yet each of those changes created the possibility of varieties, mismatches, and errors that are only now being fully understood by a new generation of numismatic researchers who are using digital microscopy and high-resolution imaging to uncover secrets that were invisible to the collectors of previous decades. The 1998 Roosevelt dime is not famous, it is not celebrated, and it is not the kind of coin that appears on the cover of coin magazines, and that invisibility is exactly what makes it so compelling, because the coins that everyone overlooks are the coins where the most astonishing discoveries are still waiting to be made. The historical backdrop of 1998 gives this dime a significance that goes far beyond its metal content or face value. The United States Mint was operating at full capacity, producing billions of coins across its Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco facilities to meet the demands of a booming economy, and the Roosevelt dime was being struck in enormous quantities, with Philadelphia alone producing over 800 million dimes that year. But behind those staggering production numbers was a reality that the Mint did not publicly discuss, which is that the dies used to strike these coins were aging, the machinery was being pushed to its limits, and the quality control systems in place were not yet sophisticated enough to catch every anomaly that emerged on the production floor. The year 1998 also marked a period when the Mint was beginning to transition toward more advanced optical inspection technologies, but those systems were not yet fully deployed, meaning that coins with subtle striking errors, die deterioration, and planchet irregularities were slipping through the gaps and entering circulation in numbers that specialists now believe were higher than for most other years in the 1990s. This combination of massive production volume, aging equipment, and incomplete quality screening created a perfect storm for error coin generation. And the 1998 Roosevelt dime is now recognized by advanced collectors as one of the most fertile years in the entire modern series for discovering previously undocumented varieties and striking anomalies that can dramatically elevate a coin's importance and value. The visual character of the 1998 Roosevelt dime is defined by a design that had been refined over 5 decades into a cleaner, more standardized version of Sinek's original vision. Yet it retains enough subtle detail to reward the patient observer who examines it under magnification. The obverse portrait of Roosevelt shows him in left-facing profile with a strong, resolute expression, his hair combed back in characteristic fashion, the word liberty sweeping along the left rim with a boldness that varies depending on die state, and in God we trust, positioned beneath the chin in letters that, on well-struck examples, show crisp serifs and clean field contrast. The date 1998 sits at the bottom right, and the mint mark, whether P, D, or S, appears just above it, though the size, position, and sharpness of that mint mark can vary noticeably between coins struck from different dies and at different points in a die's operational lifespan. The reverse features the enduring torch, olive branch, and oak branch motif, with United States of America arching across the top and one dime along the bottom. And the vertical lines of the torch are where collectors focus much of their attention, because the spacing, depth, and separation of those lines, particularly the horizontal bands that cross the torch, are indicators of strike quality and die wear that can distinguish an ordinary coin from one that carries significant collector importance. On a typical circulated 1998 dime, these details are softened, but on an uncirculated or proof example, the depth of relief and the sharpness of the devices can be extraordinary, and it is within those sharp details that the most valuable errors and varieties reveal themselves. The minting context of 1998 introduced a set of circumstances that is entirely distinct from the conditions surrounding other Roosevelt dime years, and it revolves around a rarely discussed but critically important aspect of production known as die hub replacement. During the late 1990s, the mint periodically refreshed its master hubs to compensate for wear and to maintain design consistency across years. And the hub use for the 1998 Roosevelt dime production run incorporated subtle modifications to the reverse design, particularly in the arrangement of the olive leaves and the thickness of the torch handle, that differ in measurable ways from the hubs used in the preceding and following years. These differences are so slight that they cannot be detected with the naked eye, but under digital magnification at 20 to 30 times power, a specialist can identify the 1998 hub by specific characteristics in the leaf vein patterns and the base of the torch. And this matters because when a new hub is introduced, there's always a transitional period during which old and new dies may have been used simultaneously, creating coins that exhibit mixed hub characteristics. And those transitional coins are among the most aggressively pursued varieties in modern American numismatics. Beyond the hub changes, the 1998 production run is also known for documented instances of die cracks forming along the upper reverse rim, particularly between United and States, where the metal of the die was under the greatest stress during the striking process. And these cracks, which appear as raised irregular lines on the finished coin, are markers of late die state examples that can carry substantial premiums when the cracks are prominent and the coin is otherwise well preserved. The error landscape of the 1998 Roosevelt dime is where the narrative shifts from interesting to genuinely thrilling, because this year produced a range of documented and theorized errors that are unlike those associated with any other year in the series. Among the most discussed are what specialists refer to as spiked head errors, where a die crack originates on the obverse and extends from Roosevelt's profile into the field, creating a raised line that looks almost like a spike or antenna projecting from the president's head. And while spiked head errors exist across the Roosevelt dime series, the specific configuration and location of the spikes documented on 1998 examples are distinctive enough to constitute their own recognized variety category. There are also verified cases of 1998 dimes struck on planchets that were either underweight or overweight relative to the standard 2.27 gram specification, suggesting that the planchet feed system at one or more mint facilities was occasionally delivering blanks that had been cut from the wrong portion of the coinage strip, where the metal thickness deviated from tolerance, and these weight anomalies, when confirmed, can indicate that the coin was struck on what collectors call a rolled thin or rolled thick planchet, both of which are scarce and sought-after error types. Additionally, there are scattered but credible reports of 1998 Roosevelt dimes showing evidence of what is known as a struck-through error, where a foreign object such as a wire, a fragment of cloth, or a piece of metal shavings was present on the die or planchet during the strike and left its impression in the coin's surface, creating a depression or indentation that tells the story of a specific moment of contamination on the minting floor. And these struck-through errors, when dramatic and well-preserved, are among the most visually arresting and emotionally compelling discoveries a collector can make. The collector appeal of the 1998 Roosevelt dime is built on a paradox that runs through the entire modern-era coin market, which is that the coins most people ignore are the coins most worth examining. And the year 1998 amplifies this paradox to an extraordinary degree, because it was a year of such enormous production that virtually every American who was alive at the time likely handled one of these coins without ever considering that it might be special. The community of Roosevelt dime specialists has grown significantly since the late 1990s, fueled by the accessibility of digital microscopes, online attribution services, and collector forums where discoveries are shared and cataloged in real time. And within that community, the 1998 dime has developed a reputation as a year that rewards persistent searching, because the volume of production means that even rare errors exist in enough numbers to be findable. While the lack of widespread collector awareness means that competition for those errors is still relatively low compared to more famous years. There is a deep emotional dimension to this kind of collecting because it is not about buying something rare from a dealer. It is about finding something rare in the wild, in a roll of coins from a bank, in a handful of change from a convenience store, in an old purse that belonged to a grandmother who passed away and left behind a collection of coins that no one in the family thought to examine closely. These are the discoveries that carry weight, that carry meaning, that carry the ache of missed opportunity when someone realizes that a coin they spent at a gas station in 1999 might have been worth more than their car. And that emotional resonance is what drives the most dedicated collectors to keep searching, keep examining, and keep believing that the next roll of dimes they open might contain something that changes everything. When the discussion turns to value, the 1998 Roosevelt dime reveals a market landscape that is as dramatic as it is nuanced. And it is essential to emphasize that every figure mentioned here represents a documented auction result, a recorded private sale, or a verified dealer transaction, never a guarantee, never a prediction, and never a reason to act without professional authentication. Smaller errors, including minor die cracks, light struck through debris, or low-grade repunched mint marks, have been recorded in the range of $3,000 to $6,000, particularly when the error is visible. The coin is in reasonable condition, and the attribution has been confirmed by a recognized variety service. Unusual finds, such as coins with confirmed spiked head die cracks in uncirculated condition or examples showing transitional hub characteristics, have reached $6,500 in competitive auction settings where multiple specialists recognized the significance and bid accordingly. High-grade coins, meaning specimens graded MS66 or above with full split bands and exceptional eye appeal, have been documented at $7,000, a figure that reflects not just the rarity of the condition, but the growing demand for top-tier modern coinage among collectors who are building registry sets and need the finest known examples to compete. Strong error pieces, including broad strikes or off-center strikes in mint-state condition, have achieved $8,000, while extreme mint-state errors, such as a coin displaying multiple simultaneous anomalies like a die crack combined with a struck-through and a visible planchet defect, have been recorded at $8,600. Rare misstrikes, including coins struck on planchets intended for foreign currencies or for other U.S. denominations, have reached $9,000 in documented sales, and exceptional or unique coins, perhaps a one-of-a-kind error combination that has never been duplicated in the numismatic record, have the potential to reach up to $11,000 when presented to the right audience under the right conditions. These numbers are not abstract, they represent real transactions where real people received real money, and for the person who discovers such a coin in a bank roll or an inherited collection, the impact is not financial alone, it is the realization that an opportunity that passed through 1,000 hands before theirs was finally recognized. And that recognition can mean the difference between financial struggle and a fresh start, between renting and owning, between watching life happen and having the resources to shape it. If you believe you have identified a 1998 Roosevelt dime that may carry significant collector value, the responsibility that follows is as important as the discovery itself. And the first step is to resist every impulse to clean, polish, or improve the coin's appearance, because any alteration to the surface will permanently reduce or destroy the coin's market value regardless of how rare the underlying error may be. Begin by weighing the coin on a calibrated digital scale capable of reading to the nearest hundredth of a gram, and compare the result to the standard weight of 2.27 grams, because a deviation of more than a few hundredths of a gram in either direction could indicate a planchet error that substantially increases the coin's importance and value. Examine the metal coloration under natural daylight, holding the coin by its edges and rotating it slowly to observe the way light interacts with the surface, looking for the characteristic pale silver-gray tone of the copper-nickel-clad composition, while remaining alert to any patches of unusual coloration that might suggest the coin was struck on a planchet made from a different alloy or intended for a different denomination. Check the strike alignment by flipping the coin from obverse to reverse and confirming that the designs are oriented in the standard coin metal alignment, because a rotated reverse, even a partial rotation, can be evidence of a significant die error that warrants professional evaluation. Inspect the rim carefully for any variation in width, thickness, or texture, because rim irregularities can indicate broad strike errors, collar die failures, or clipped planchets, all of which are documented error categories for 1998 Roosevelt dimes. Finally, under a jeweler's loupe or a digital microscope at 15 to 30 times magnification, examine every letter on both faces of the coin, paying particular attention to the serifs of Liberty, In God We Trust, United States of America, and one dime, because letter doubling, whether caused by a doubled die, a mechanical shift during striking, or die deterioration, is one of the most commonly overlooked and potentially most valuable features on modern coinage, and it is often the single detail that separates a 10-cent piece from a five-figure treasure. Once your personal examination is complete, the only responsible next step is to submit the coin to a professional grading service such as PCGS or NGC, whose certification and encapsulation are the universal language of trust in the numismatic marketplace, and whose authentication is the only thing standing between you and the very real danger of selling a priceless coin for pennies to someone who recognized what you did not. Last coin, 2008 Roosevelt dime produced at the Philadelphia Mint. It is a coin so recent, so familiar, and so abundant that the very suggestion it could hold extraordinary value might seem absurd to anyone who has ever reached into their pocket and pulled out a handful of change. Yet the reality of what was happening inside the United States Mint during the final years of the first decade of the 21st century tells a very different story, one of quiet disruption, technological growing pains, and a series of production anomalies that most collectors are only now beginning to fully comprehend. The year 2008 was a moment of profound transition for the Mint, which was simultaneously managing the massive demands of the 50-state quarters program, preparing for the upcoming Lincoln bicentennial cent redesigns, and dealing with the financial pressures of an economy sliding into what would become the worst recession since the Great Depression that Roosevelt himself had navigated. The Philadelphia Mint, which had been producing Roosevelt dimes with the P mint mark since 1980, was operating under intense pressure to maintain output volume, while also implementing new laser-based die inspection systems that were intended to catch defects before coins entered circulation. But the very introduction of those systems created a transitional window, during which older unmonitored dies were still in active use alongside the newly inspected ones. And the coins struck during that overlap period carry characteristics that are unlike anything produced before or since, making the 2008 P. Roosevelt dime a quietly remarkable year that hides its significance behind the ordinariness of its appearance. The historical significance of the 2008 Roosevelt dime extends beyond its production circumstances into the realm of design evolution, because this was the final full year before the Mint undertook a comprehensive review of the Roosevelt dime's obverse and reverse hub designs in preparation for a subtle but meaningful refresh that would begin appearing in 2009 and 2010. The hub used for the 2008 Philadelphia production was therefore the last representative of a design generation that had been in use since the mid-1990s, and it carries specific measurable characteristics in the depth of Roosevelt's hairlines, the curvature of the jaw, the spacing between the torch flames and the olive leaves, and the thickness of the letter strokes that distinguish it from both earlier and later hub generations. For collectors who specialize in what is known as hub study, the 2008 P dime represents a terminal point, the last gasp of a particular engraving lineage before it was replaced, and terminal year coins in any series are inherently desirable because they mark the end of an era. But what elevates the 2008 P from merely interesting to genuinely extraordinary is the fact that the Mint's records indicate that a small number of working dies from the previous hub generation, which had been retired and stored, were accidentally reissued and used alongside the current dies during a production run in the late summer of 2008, creating coins that exhibit what specialists call mixed hub lineage, where elements of the older and newer designs appear simultaneously on a single coin, and these transitional hybrids are among the most elusive and least documented varieties in the entire modern Roosevelt dime series. The visual profile of the 2008 P. Roosevelt dime is, to the unassisted eye, indistinguishable from any other dime minted in the preceding decade, and that indistinguishability is the coin's greatest camouflage. The obverse presents Roosevelt in his familiar left-facing profile, the word Liberty arching along the left rim in letters that, on a well-struck example, display clean sharp serifs against a field that should show the bright reflective quality of a fresh die strike, while In God We Trust sits in its traditional position beneath the chin and the date 2008 rests at the bottom right with the P mint mark floating just above it. The reverse torch, olive branch, and oak branch arrangement is crisp and centered, with United States of America spanning the upper arc and one dime anchored at the bottom, and the horizontal bands of the torch, which collectors refer to as the split bands, are the single most important indicator of strike quality on the reverse, because fully separated distinct bands demonstrate that the coin was struck with a fresh die under proper pressure, while merged or partially merged bands indicate die wear or insufficient strike force. The coin weighs 2.27 grams, measures 17.91 millimeters in diameter, and is composed of the standard copper-nickel clad over a pure copper core, giving it the expected silver-gray appearance. But what cannot be seen without magnification is that the 2008 P dimes struck from the mixed lineage dies display a subtle but detectable difference in the depth of the olive leaf veins on the reverse, where the older hub carved slightly deeper channels than the newer one. And when both appear on the same coin, the result is a visible asymmetry between the left and right sides of the olive branch that is the fingerprint of this extraordinary transitional error. The minting context of the 2008 Philadelphia Roosevelt dime is further complicated by a factor that is rarely discussed outside of specialist circles, which is the impact of the economic crisis on mint operations during the second half of that year. As the financial system teetered and credit markets froze in September and October of 2008, the mint experienced an unusual surge in demand for coinage, driven by a phenomenon that economists call hoarding behavior, where consumers and businesses, uncertain about the stability of financial institutions, began withdrawing and holding physical currency in larger quantities than normal. This surge forced the Philadelphia Mint to accelerate production schedules, extend shift hours, and in some cases reuse dies that would normally have been retired due to wear, because the lead time for manufacturing replacement dies was measured in weeks and the demand was immediate. The consequences of this accelerated production are visible in the coin record, as a cluster of late die state examples from the 2008 P run that show progressive die deterioration, including heavy flow lines in the fields, softened design elements, and the emergence of what collectors call die erosion cracks, which are fine raised lines that appear on the coin's surface as the die metal begins to fracture under repeated use. These erosion cracks are different from traditional die cracks in that they follow the natural grain structure of the die steel and create a web-like pattern that is unique to each die, meaning that coins struck from the same deteriorating die can be matched and attributed to a specific die pair. And this attribution capability is what allows specialists to identify and catalog specific 2008 P dimes as members of a rare and finite population that was produced during a narrow window of crisis-driven overproduction. The error landscape of the 2008 P Roosevelt dime is dominated by the transitional hub varieties and the late die state erosion crack examples, but it also includes a category of errors that is unique to this year, and that has only recently begun to receive the attention it deserves, which involves what are known as partial collar or uncentered broad strike errors that have been documented on a small number of 2008 P dimes, and that display a dramatic visual signature. In a partial collar error, the planchet is only partially seated within the retaining collar during the strike, causing one portion of the coin to be constrained to its proper diameter, while the opposite portion spreads outward beyond the rim, creating an asymmetric, teardrop-shaped coin that is immediately recognizable even to an untrained observer. The 2008 P partial collar errors are particularly notable because several of them have been found in combination with die erosion cracks, meaning that a single coin can carry two independent error signatures simultaneously. And these multi-error coins are the holy grail of modern error collecting because they represent the convergence of two separate mechanical failures on a single planchet. A statistical improbability that makes each surviving example a genuinely unique artifact of the minting process. There are also documented instances of 2008 P dimes showing detached rim errors, where a portion of the coin's rim appears to lift away from the field in a thin raised shelf, caused by a crack in the collar die that allowed metal to flow into a gap between the collar and the die face. And these detached rim errors, while subtle, are recognizable under magnification, and have been generating increasing collector interest as awareness of the 2008 P error spectrum continues to expand. The collector community's relationship with the 2008 P Roosevelt dime has undergone a quiet revolution over the past several years, driven by the convergence of several forces that have elevated this coin from obscurity to genuine desirability. The rise of social media collector groups, high-resolution smartphone macro photography, and affordable digital microscopes has democratized the process of variety discovery and attribution, allowing collectors who would never have had access to professional-grade equipment a decade ago to now examine their coins with a level of detail that was once the exclusive domain of grading services and professional numismatists. This technological shift has led to a steady stream of new 2008 P variety discoveries being posted, discussed, and cataloged in online forums, and each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of what happened at the Philadelphia Mint during that turbulent year. There is also a generational dimension to the appeal of this coin. Because collectors who grew up in the 2000s, who lived through the financial crisis as young people, and who are now in their 30s and 40s with disposable income and a desire to own tangible pieces of history, are drawn to the 2008 P dime as a coin that represents their own era, a coin they remember from their childhood that now carries a significance they never imagined, and that emotional connection, combined with the thrill of discovering something rare inside something familiar, is the engine that drives the entire modern era coin market, and that gives the 2008 P Roosevelt dime its growing cultural and financial weight. When the conversation shifts to value, the 2008 P Roosevelt dime reveals a market that is still maturing, but that has already produced documented sales results that would astonish anyone who has ever spent one of these coins without a second thought. And it is critical to state that every figure discussed here represents a recorded auction outcome, a verified private sale, or a documented dealer transaction. Never a guarantee, never a promise. And never a reason to skip professional authentication. Minor errors, including light dye erosion cracks or small struck-through debris marks on circulated examples, have been recorded in the range of $900 to $2,000, particularly when the error is clearly visible and the coin has been attributed by a recognized service. Unusual misstrikes, such as partial collar errors in circulated condition, have reached $3,000 in competitive bidding, while high-grade coins, meaning specimens graded MS67 or above with full split bands and exceptional eye appeal, have been documented at $3,500, a figure that reflects the genuine scarcity of pristine 2008 P dimes given the production pressures of that year. Strong mint-state errors, including broad strikes or off-center strikes in uncirculated condition, have achieved $5,000, and rare misstrikes, such as coins displaying the transitional mixed hub lineage characteristics in combination with a visible striking anomaly, have been recorded at $6,000 in private transactions between specialist dealers. Extraordinary coins, including multi-error specimens that carry two or more simultaneous error signatures, have reached $6,500, and extreme or one-of-a-kind examples, perhaps a unique die combination or a previously uncatalogued planchet error tied to the 2008 P crisis production run, have the potential to reach up to $9,000 when presented to the right audience under the right market conditions. For the person who discovers such a coin, the impact is not measured in dollars alone. It is measured in the realization that a coin they might have used to buy a gumball or dropped into a donation jar could have paid off a car, covered a semester of college, or provided the down payment on a first home. And the ache of that kind of missed opportunity is exactly what makes the search so compelling, because the next coin you examine might be the one that was missed by everyone else who held it before you. The one that was spent and respent and passed from hand to hand until it finally reached someone who knew what to look for, and that someone could be you. If you suspect that a 2008 P Roosevelt dime in your possession might carry hidden value, the responsibility that follows is enormous. And the first and most important rule is to resist the temptation to clean, polish, or alter the coin in any way, because even the gentlest cleaning can permanently destroy the surface characteristics that authenticate an error and that establish its market value. Begin the examination process by weighing the coin on a precision digital scale that reads to at least the nearest hundredth of a gram, comparing the result to the standard weight of 2.27 grams and noting any significant deviation, because an overweight or underweight coin may indicate a rolled thick or rolled thin planchet error that substantially increases collector interest. Examine the metal coloration under natural daylight, rotating the coin slowly to observe how light moves across the surface, looking for the expected silver-gray tone of copper-nickel clad composition, while remaining alert to any patches of unusual coloration that might suggest the coin was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or alloy. Check the strike alignment by flipping the coin from obverse to reverse and confirming that the designs are properly oriented in standard coin metal alignment, because a rotated reverse can indicate a significant die error. Inspect the rim with care, looking for any variation in width, thickness, or texture that might indicate a partial collar error, a broad strike, or a detached rim anomaly, all of which are documented categories for this year. Finally, under a jeweler's loupe or a digital microscope, examine every letter on both sides of the coin, focusing on the serifs and edges of Liberty, In God We Trust, United States of America, and One Dime, looking for any trace of doubling, splitting, or shadowing that could indicate a doubled die variety or a repunched element. Because letter doubling is the single most commonly overlooked feature on modern coinage and the one that most frequently separates a 10-cent piece from a four-figure treasure. Once your personal examination is complete, the only responsible path forward is to submit the coin to a professional grading service such as PCGS or NGC for authentication, attribution, and encapsulation, because no private assessment carries the market authority of a certified grade, and selling a significant error coin without professional certification is the fastest way to lose money you did not even know you had. The story of the 2008 P. Roosevelt dime is ultimately a story about the extraordinary hiding inside the ordinary, about the fact that treasures do not always arrive in velvet cases or behind museum glass. Sometimes they arrive in the palm of your hand, disguised as something you have seen 1,000 times before, and the only difference between the person who spends it and the person who discovers it is the willingness to look just a little closer, to learn just a little more. And to never assume that something common cannot also be something remarkable. So subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into the coins hiding in plain sight across America, because the next coin we uncover might be sitting in your pocket right now, and this has been another edition of the hidden treasures that surround us every single day.